Hi there, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be creating this beautiful landing page using React Tree Fiber and Three.js. This is part one of this project. We will be turning this into a scrollable experience soon, so please be sure to subscribe, like it, and share it with your friends. And without any further ado, let's get started. One of the things that I love doing is searching for references. And for me, the most accurate and I would say creative way we can find references is by using this Shutterstock movie library. So you just search for video and then type here what you want to get inspiration from. And then as you can see, you have a lot of great ideas that you can use to build your creative projects. And there are like tons of possibilities, like a lot of creative ideas. I really liked one here specifically that called my attention in all of them. Like all of them are great, but like this one here with this distortion is one of those that I really like it. And another one was this one here that can serve as a reference, and you can always click and then see it bigger. And as you can see, it is again a great visual, a great idea that we can try to replicate using Three.js. And also this one here, very, very interesting. And the way it looks, the kind of distortion, and the way I approach this when I looked something like this, I try to remember or I try to search specifically on the React Tree Fiber dry library, which is the one that I use. And we have a lot of components and a lot of effects that are pre-built. And for this specific effect, we already have in the dry library a mesh transmission material. And with that, we can replicate this kind of effect pretty easily. And yeah, this is what we will try to replicate using Three.js. As always, everything is start in the React Tree Fiber template. It is pretty simple, nothing fancy. We just have what we already receive as a default component for React Tree Fiber using Code Sandbox. We have all of the dependencies here, and that's all for now. And we have the rotating cube. So I will start by removing this rotating cube because this is not what we want. So this thing can go away. We can just for now add, just to be sure that it is working as always, is great. We just add the box component here from dry library, and then we will get the box. And then just to have how to manipulate this, we add orbit controls from dry as well. And then we have it, pretty simple. Now the first thing we need, if we want like to build something like that reference, and let's go back here. It is like define the background color, and let me pick one that I like. So I will change the background color to the color that I choose. And now let's have something on the screen so we will be able to see something. I will remove the box and I will change this by a capsule component. And we have a lot of options for this capsule. You can always check all of the options in the documentation. And for this one here, probably I need to increase the resolution because as you can see, we have like all of the parts. Let me change the color so we can see it a little bit better. So I will just put a material here. Let's change to mesh physical material. Let's set the color to be gray. And again, we have no lights in the scene. That's why it's all black. So instead of adding lights, I will start by adding the environment component, and I will choose the preset as city. Let's see how it looks. And when you have this kind of thing, we need to remember that city is preloaded from another place. So this needs to be wrapped into a suspense using React Tree Fiber. So let's bring suspense from React and wrap everything on suspense, and it works. So now, as you can see, we have like a low resolution, so we can change that just by changing the amount of divisions that we have here. So I can remember exactly, but I think it is through the args. So using the args, you can define everything that defines this capsule. And we have some parameters here that we need to pass as an array. So because I don't remember what I would do, I will open another tab saying capsule Three.js, and probably this will drop me on the documentation for Three.js itself. And here I can see all of the parameters that are accepted by the args. So those are the parameters, and we can define the radius, the length, the segments on the cap, and the radial segments. So in our case, probably we need to increase the radial segments. So what we can do is copy this so we can have a reference, then go back here, and I will place it. And now I can increase this number to be probably 32. And yeah, it is looking better. And I think I can also increase the height. I want this to be a little bit bigger, probably 2. Yeah, looks great. And now let's continue by changing the material. So I want this to be looking like glass. So what I need is dry mesh physical mesh transition material. So again, let's search for dry. Let's check the documentation, and we have all of the shaders and materials and everything here. And one of them is mesh transition material. And if you need a reference, if you need an example from code, you can click here, and then you get the reference. But in my case, I just need some of the parameters. I don't remember all of them, but I will trust that I will remember all of them as we go. So I will change this one here by mesh transition material, and then we can close. And by default, you already have something that looks like glass. And by the way, it is reflecting the environment that it's here. That is why I always recommend you guys use the environment before placing any lights in your scene, because if you use this, it doesn't use that much memory because it is like using less resources on calculating lights and all of the shaders, and you also get reflections by default. So it is looking great. Not super great yet because we need to change some things, but it's looking great already. It looks like glass at least. So I will change some of the parameters, for example, anisotropic to be 2, and I will also change the chromatic aberration to be 0.3. Or even more. Like I will adjust all of those parameters after we have something inside, because we can see it better. But for now, that's it. Now I want to use like a DNA chain inside because like from this reference, it looks great, but I feel it is lacking something inside. So let me try to, and what I always do, like I search, of course, in Sketchfab for free models. Remember, you need to get the reference and always give credits for the models that you use. I usually create my own models as well, but in this case, because it is just a tutorial, I will be using a free one. And we have a bunch of them here, so I just searched for DNA downloadable, and then we can see here we have a lot of examples. So we have this one, which looks promising. And by the way, this guy is also Brazilian, which is great. But like in my case, for what I want, this is super detailed and has a lot of meshes and a lot of complexity that I don't need in this specific case, like in this project that I'm using. You can always check the complexity by checking the wireframe mode on Sketchfab. And as you can see, this is way too complex. Like we have almost 3,000 triangles. We don't we don't need that. So what we can use, let's see, this one, but then we need to remove the base, so that will be too much. Um, Maybe this one. Yeah, this one will work, but let me continue to see if we can get something that it's even simpler and easier to use. And yeah, this one here looks great, looks simple. Let's check. Yeah, the amount of triangles is okay for what we need. Is super centered. So I think this one will work for what we need. And yeah, once you download it, you can go to the GLTF JSX. You drop your file here, so I will just drag and drop the DNA chain that we downloaded from that website, and we already have it. And now it is really complex. It doesn't need to, but in our case here, I will just use the way it is. So we can export, copy to clipboard, go into our project, and of course we need to upload our model here as well. But let's create first the the model. So I will say DNA, paste everything, and I will change this to DNA just to be sure that the name matches. I will export this as default because it is easier for me to handle this. And then I will save, I will upload the DNA to the public folder. Yeah, and now let's go here and let's add the DNA. Every time you need to load something that externally load, you need to wrap this into a suspense. And yeah, we already have the DNA, but as you can see, it is misplaced and it is huge. So we can adjust that just by setting some parameters. Now that we have some of the parameters correct, we can change some of the parameters on the pill shape. I want this to be a little bit bigger. And here, like it is the creative part. You need to be creative with the parameters, with the values. And we can also, I guess, adjust the parameters on the pill material. The thickness parameter is really interesting because it creates this kind of distortion because we are using the anisotropy. So if you change like them, you can see immediately the impact that is created inside this shape, which is really interesting. You can over exaggerate the values, you can change on the fly and see the reflection in real time. And with this technique, you can create interesting effects. I will leave this as it is for now. Let's also change the materials on the DNA. So let's check for the materials because we have a lot of groups here, and seems like a lot of materials as well. So let's check all the materials. And yeah, now we can see the materials, and looks like we have two materials, the base and the fita. I think this is also Portuguese, seems like Portuguese. So we can change them to be something else. So let's do that. I just commented out the material, the original one, and now I will create another mesh physical material here because I want to change this to be kind of metal. Let's see how it works. I will do the same with the other part. And now it's looking a little bit better. We can also tweak this in the future, which I will probably do. But for now, this will do the job. And as you can see, we have reflections as well inside because this is using mesh physical material now, and we have the environment map, so we can also get reflections from that. Let me try to adjust the parameters for the chromatic aberration because I think maybe it is too subtle. So we need to adjust this. Yeah, now I adjusted the parameters for some of the mesh transition materials properties. And again, my work is really experimental. So I have no idea what the end result will be because I'm creating this as we go. So this is totally fine to work this way, but you need to change the parameters and see in real time here so we can have an idea how we want this to look like. Let's make this DNA chain to be rotating, and this is pretty easy to do because everything is grouped inside this first group here. We already have a reference for the entire DNA, which is this one here, so we can make it rotate just by using the use frame hook, which will give us access to the frame loop inside the Three.js frame loop. And now we first need to check if we already have the group as the reference. Then we can make group dot rotation. I guess it is y plus equals 0.1. We need to remember that we need to use, because this is a reference, we need to check if it is the current value has the property that we need. And of course you need to type current correctly because otherwise it will not work. And now, as you can see, we already have it. It is rotating pretty fast. We need to, of course, change the positions because it's a little bit off. And we also need to change the way we are setting this because This way will make everything run faster depending on the computer's GPU and the FPS. So we need to use the current time for that and the difference on the delta time. Now that we adjusted the position, the DNA is rotating properly inside, so we can move forward. And what I will do next is to place the DNA inside the capsule so we can rotate as a group everything and tilt a little bit. So I will put this inside the suspense and I will create a group for all of those items. And you can wrap everything inside that group. And now we can rotate this entire group a little bit. Yeah, I think that's okay for now. So we can move forward. Let's bring a particle system to the page to make things more interesting. The way I'm using particle system here is just by creating a new file, particles.jasx, and then I'm pasting a code that I already have for the particle system. The code is in the source below, so you can use it. And it is pretty simple to use. All that you have to set is the particle number. And I had to install another dependency that I was using in the particle system. But then once you set the particle count, the particles will start displaying on your project. And of course, you can set the parameters, you can change the speed of the particles, you can change a bunch of parameters inside these component. That is the beauty of using React 3 Fiber components, because you can just copy and paste from your other projects and you are done. You can set all of the parameters again with one single line of code, and that is pretty magical. Now that we have the particle system in place and it is looking great with a very natural movement, I think I will do some extra work to get better reflections on the pill-shaped object. The way I like to set up this is by setting the background in the environment, and then I'm using light formers, which is a great component from React Dry, which enables you to create fake lights in an environment map. So as you can see here, we have this huge reflection because we have that plane, and you can use as much planes as you want to create the effect that you want to achieve by changing the positions and the scales and everything else. See? And yeah, and once you are happy with the results and you have everything in place and in all of the places that you want, all that you have to do is to comment out the background property, and all of the fake lights will be in place. So as you can see here, we have those planes we can't see anymore in the background, but we have the reflections on the pill-shaped object, which is great. I applied some color corrections for the DNA chain because I think it looks better. And now let's make some adjustments to the color, the overall color. And I will do it by adjusting the parameters on the environment that we have here. Yeah, now we have brighter colors, and now I will adjust like the overall color by changing some of the parameters and adding post-processing. Now that we have the bloom, it looks too bright and too intense, and I will reduce it by changing the levels. So I will add a little bit of more levels so we can soften everything. And I will change the luminosity smooth to be something like bigger so we can soften everything else. And I will probably also change the threshold. I think I can also drop the intensity a little bit. It is too intense. I just want a little bit of the bloom, but not too much. And now let's add the depth of field. Now we need to adjust the parameters for focus distance, focus length, and bokeh scale. Yeah, I still think the bloom is too intense, so I will drop a little bit more. And we can do this by reducing intensity. And also, we can also make this a little bit more intense, but then dropping the opacity on it. Yeah, maybe the reflexive objects are too intense as well now that we have it, so we can reduce the brightness on them a little bit more so they can shine, but not that much. Yep, we add some text so we can see something more interesting here. So I'll use the text component from Dry as well. Now I want this text to be behind, and I will adjust some parameters so we can have this behind this pill-shaped object and rotate around as well. Now the font is intersecting the pill, and I want this to be a little bit back. So I will move this behind the capsule. Let's adjust the camera zoom a little bit so we can see more of our object. Yeah, that's okay. And now let's take a look at the particles. I think they are way too bright, so I think we can reduce the brightness a little bit more. Now we have better particles, they look more natural. Now let's move forward and change the fonts and the overall look for the text of this hero section. I usually don't create designs for my designs. I do everything live, which is pretty experimental again, even with the design. I don't recommend that because it is much easier if you create the design first and then you just implement what you have. But I like this idea of experimenting even with the fonts. So in this case, I choose this font out of a lot of scrolling on Google Fonts, trying to imagine my design with that font. And again, this is usually a process that you do on Figma, on design softwares. But because I'm so used to this kind of process, I like the way I create stuff. But again, it takes longer, and I don't recommend that much this process. You can do it better if you do the design first. Now that we have the font in place, the colors and everything else, we can play with the parameters for making this capsule floating around. And we can do that by just replacing the group here with the float dry component. And now we have it floating around, and I will play with extra parameters to make it a little bit faster and moving a little bit more. Yeah, it feels a little bit more natural now. It is floating around. We can see through the pill-shaped object, the text. And now I think we can play with some extra parameters and adding camera movement as we move our mouse. Now that we have the camera rig component, it kind of follows the mouse, so we can adjust the parameters. Now it feels a little bit more natural, and maybe we can even disable the camera controls because now they are in conflict. I'm trying to move the camera, and as I'm trying to move, at the same time, this code is trying to follow the cursor to align things in the center. So now that we have here, we can remove the orbit controls. Now let's optimize performance to get better results in lower end computers, and we can do that by changing the parameters of the renderer. And the first one is to set the alias, the anti-alias, to be false. Also the alpha to be false because we don't need it. And we can also set in the canvas the DPR to be, in this case, I think 1 will be more than enough for the resolution that we need. And this will give us better performance by default, especially on computers that has higher resolutions. And I can feel it's a little bit faster. But to improve it even further, because we are using post-processing, the effect composer now it is taking control of everything that the canvas was rendering, because now it is reusing the effect composer as a renderer device. And what we can do here is also set the multi-sampling to be something else than 4, which is the default. You can even set this to 0, but this will look like really jagged edges, as you can see here. So I usually set this to 1 or 2, and you can bring back some of the anti-alias by using SMAA, and this will give you kind of the same result as before, but with better performance, overall performance. And now let's make some adjustments to the overall color. I would say this is one of the most experimental parts of my work. I really enjoy playing with colors, playing with the values, getting different results, seeing things through the code change, and then after a lot of experimentation, I end up with something that I like, but it depends on the project, it depends on what I'm trying to achieve. So yeah, be careful and always play with the numbers concerning colors. One important thing to keep in mind is like the order of all of those effects, they matter a lot. So depending on what order you place them, you can get different results. So pay attention with the order, because some of them requires to be the first one in chain. For example, the SMAA, you need to make it the first one in the chain so we can get proper results. I hope you like it. In the next episode, we will be turning this into a scrollable experience, adding some context, creating a page around this object, and then we can probably rotate the object and show content, making this page a scrollable experience. So I hope you like it. Thank you very much for sticking with me all of this time. Please support the channel, subscribe, like it, and share it with your friends so we can reach more developers around here, okay? Thank you very much. See you in the next episode. Bye bye.